Hey guys, welcome back to my War Games hobby channel. We're at the club tonight and we're about to start another game, so I'll show you through it now. Okay, so tonight we're going to be playing a game of Muskets and Tomahawks, the second version of the rules, and we're playing American War of Independence. We've got a British force in the middle of the table, as you can see here. And they're defending some civilians which are in the two buildings here and here. Nobody in the barn. And the army list, which I'll show you now, consists of 8 grenadiers, which are over here, a unit of British infantry, normal line infantry, another unit of light infantry, and then we have over the far side there a provisional unit of infantry of 12, quite a large unit, and then 6 provincial light infantry. So that's the British. We're not sure what the Americans have got, but it comes to 400 points. I think they're mainly provincials and they've got some minutemen as well. And they're coming on the deployment points, which you can see, or either that one there, the blue one, down this end of the table. And there's another 2 deployment points over here. One's hidden underneath these books. Now you can decide where they come on their first move, and they can choose any of those deployment points. So I'm not going to video the whole game. I'm just going to do highlights of the game as things progress, and we're just about to start the first move. So I'll report back when they've done that. Okay, before we actually start, I just need to point out that we did toss to see who was the attacker, and it was the Americans who won that. And then the Americans, their mission was massacre. So you can see there they had to win the game immediately if one of the 2 conditions apply. At least half the civilian figures, including the leader, are dead or routed, or all the civilian figures except the leader are dead or routed. The British had protection, so they had to basically protect the village, and on when the 3rd and 4th clocks, red clocks are drawn, it's considered they're completed if all the buildings in the hamlet are under guard, and that means that they have to have at least 6 figures and no enemy figures inside it, or have no enemy figures within 6 inches, even if you're not occupying it. So that's what they had to do. They were the victory conditions. Right, a quick update. The first moves have happened. The Continentals have come on over here, and you can see now they're also being joined by some Minutemen. Or are they rifles? They're riflemen, okay, they're riflemen coming on there. The British first move was to shoot at the Continentals. They only caused 1 casualty and the morale was fine. The light infantry have moved over here behind that minute little hedge, which is not going to give them any cover at all really, because it's not very high. Sorry about that, folks. And over here the rifles have moved over to a bigger hedge, which will give them a bit of cover, and these guys haven't moved at all because they don't know where else the Americans are coming on. They see they could come on here, they could come on there, but the entire army could come on over there. So we'll see what happens. Right, a quick update. You can see over there the rifles have moved up. They've opened fire and caused casualties over here on the Brits, but the Brits' morale is fine, as you would imagine. Over here, these rifles open fire as well. Well, incidentally, these guys are the militia. The Minutemen are moving up into the rocky ground and into this wood. But these guys, rifles, opened fire at the Loyalists there, and they rolled a really bad morale dice. They lost a man and moved back, and they're shaken as well. But still early days, so a long way to go. Right, we've just had the first full turn where all the cards came out, so the deck's been reshuffled. And an update is the Continentals are moving forward there. They're getting away from that table edge because they were a bit too close to it if they get pushed back. In the middle, the Grenadiers have taken a few casualties and the other regulars won. Over here, the Loyalists have recovered and are coming forward again now. They did volley fire into this wood, killing one of the Minutemen, but they were fine with that. So the other Minutemen are moved up here, and these guys are riflemen. So that's a quarter of the game done, and the Brits have got to start moving forward to get near those buildings soon, because we've already had 2 clock cards come out from the deck straight away in the first dealing of 3 cards to each side. So if another clock card comes out, we're halfway through the game. So that's pretty scary for the Brits. I think they've realised they've got to get their finger out. Right, another update. The Americans are moving forward over there, as you can see. They want to get within 6 inches of that building. So the Brits can't claim any sort of victory at any time. There's more Minutemen going forward here. They are within 6 inches of the barn now, so they're happy with that. These guys opened fire on the Loyalists which are over here, and both units had to fall back shaken. They both lost one casualty. The other unit, the formed unit, lost 2. So the Brits are sort of falling back a little bit, but they're not worried yet. Early days. And the chip man's just turned up. Look, you can see chips there with barbecue sauce. Well done, Graham. Right, another update later. Right, the pressure's on. The Minutemen have gone around this corner here, near the barn and near the other building as well. The British Grenadiers are fleeing at the moment, unfortunately. They roll bad on the morale dice. The other British are down to 6 men, and although they keep firing on these guys over here, their morale is still very good, so they're not wavering at all. Those are the guys that are coming across the field, and over this way, the Loyalists are holding their own behind that hedge, and the other unit need to maybe come out and try and do something about these Minutemen, but whether they'll get the chance to do it, I don't know. At the moment, the advantage lies with the Americans. The Brits are struggling to do much in reply, but it can change very, very quickly. Right, a pretty drastic thing happened here. These Minutemen that were going behind this barn that were there charged the light infantry that were there. They managed to kill 4 figures and didn't lose any themselves, and then sadly for the Brits they rolled really poorly on the morale dice, and they're dead, they're wiped out, they've gone, routed. So that's really made it difficult for the Brits now, because they're struggling for numbers. They need to get the civilians involved, because they've been sitting in these buildings. Now if they're going to save themselves, they've got to come out and fight. Interestingly enough, if the civilians come out there and attack those in the rear, the reverse could happen. That would be interesting. Anyway, that's the next move. The Brits are struggling a bit at the moment. Right, well, okay, what's happened here is this unit over here volley fired onto the 4 remaining Brits that were there. They didn't lose, but they had to fall back. Unfortunately, the civilians came out of that building and lost 3, and they're now fleeing. But the worst part is the officer got hit and he died. So
He ran away.
he ran away.
He ran away.
Oh no, he didn't die. Then yes, I'm sorry. He routed. He had a bad morale dice. So to say the British are on the back foot is an understatement, really. I think this game's all but over, but you never know. They might make a miraculous comeback, although I don't know how.
If they were rather run away, they're running away further from us, aren't they?
So now the Minutemen are charging the civilians. That's not very nice, is it? Some good news for the Brits. These guys over here opened fire on some Minutemen when they come onto this hill, and they killed a couple, and they fled. And now they fled twice. In fact, they're running away. And over here, the civilians came out of this building and attacked the Minutemen. Oh no, you attacked them, didn't you? Yeah. And they lost, because the civilians, because they've got agricultural weapons, actually fight quite well, and they're desperate to save their lives.
Yes, nobody can stand up to a tractor.
So the Minutemen had to flee, but they have recovered. However, there's lots of Continentals coming in over there, so
That's right, Hannibal. And
it's still looking a bit dodgy, but what the Americans need to do is to kill the civilian leader, which is that guy there, yes. And if they do that, it's game over. But they've got to get to him first. The civilians got into combat with these skirmishers and they lost, and the lone survivor, which is the leader, ran away. He's got fleeing, but then the British here charged in and managed to force the skirmishers back, but they lost 2 men. Skirmishers lost 1. And over here, the British Grenadiers finally did something really, really good. They charged the 3 Minutemen that were in that field and killed all 3. I think they lost 1 themselves, didn't they? Did they lose 1? So there's still 3 men. So the British are fighting back, but is it going to be enough to save the game? I don't know. The point is if that lone civilian dies, the leader of the civilians, then it's the game to the Americans, because they need to kill him and at least half the other civilians, and they've already done that bit, so they need to try and kill that guy if they can. The Brits can't win this game, I don't think, but what they can do is force a draw if he survives. It's looking a bit unlikely, but you never know. Right, so you know I said a minute ago that the Americans can win if they kill the last civilian. Well, that's exactly what happened, because those 5 skirmishers there charged the leader of the civilians who was running away. He was fleeing anyway. He had their back to them. They charged him, and obviously they killed him. So that's it. The game is over. The British got off to a bad start, unfortunately, with some poor morale throws, never really recovered. Towards the end they were doing quite well though, but there just weren't enough of them to save the civilians. There are still other 3 civilians surviving, just in front of that house there. But if they lose their leader, more than half their civilians, which they have done, then the game goes to the American side. So that's it, the Americans won, and it was a good game. Right, well done everybody. Okay guys, so last night's game, I thought I'd give you a quick review of how I thought it went. The Brits got a bit trounced, didn't they, really, unfortunately. So why was that? Well, they both had about 400 points, but the Americans had 2 units of rifles, and the rifles are very powerful in these rules. They can stay right back in cover and just pick off, which is exactly what happened in the war, of course. But as a war game, when you've got 2 units of rifles in a game and the other side haven't got any, then it's going to be, I think, quite difficult. The British didn't know where the Americans were coming on, and the light infantry was facing a direction that nothing came, so they had to turn around and come back the other way. And the Grenadiers and the other 8 line infantry were faced with 2 large units of Continentals backed by a unit of rifles. So it was basically 16 against 30. So they're always going to lose a firefight. On the other side, another unit of rifles were backed up by 2 small units of Minutemen. Was still too much for the Loyalists, but they did roll very badly for morale. The first 2 dice rolls that Tony did for the British Loyalist close order infantry were both noughts, so it's difficult to do much with that. They just kept falling back in disorder, and they got outgunned on that side as well. So it was a really tough game. The civilians possibly could have been used a bit earlier. Andy decided to keep them safe because what I don't think I explained too well at the beginning was that the British could win by protecting the village, not letting the enemy get within 6 inches of any of the buildings. And in move 4, if that had been the case, they would have won. But that was never going to be the case. They were a bit outnumbered anyway. The Americans were always going to try and get at least 1 unit near one of those buildings. So it was a tough call for the Brits, really. All they could do is maybe play for a draw. But what they didn't want to do is they didn't want the civilians to get killed, because if you look at what the Americans had to do, they had when we rolled for the game, and it was purely random, we didn't know who was going to be attacking and who was going to be defending, but it turned out to be that the Americans were the attackers, and the defenders were always, well, certainly the British were in a rather difficult position. And the Americans got massacred, so the way they could win was to at least half the civilians' figures, including the leader, are dead or routed, or all the civilian figures are dead. Doesn't have to be the leader then, but so I think Andy wanted to protect the civilians, but possibly they could have come out earlier to help. I decided to make them, incidentally, the civilians, units of civilians armed with agricultural weapons, which gave them a slightly better aggression and defence than the normal civilians. But that's because it was a sort of a farmstead, and it seemed right that in a farmstead they would have sort of agricultural weapons. Although the two Americans protested about that, but I decided, as I was umpiring the game, no, give them a chance. They should be armed with agricultural weapons. And in fact, they did manage to do a lot of damage to one of the Minutemen units. But in the end, they didn't really do enough to turn the game around. So yeah, it was a tough old game for the Brits. Tony rolled really badly most of the night, but those first two rolls especially were particularly bad. And it just, everything seemed to be against them. But that's how sometimes war games go. I think in all fairness though, in future, in a game like that, I would restrict the Americans to 1 unit of rifles, not 2. I think that's, to my mind, a little bit too much. Anyway, that's how it went, and another day it'll be the other way around. I tend just to do highlights of games rather than try and record the whole game, which can be sort of 2.5 hours long, which I don't think really anyone would sit and watch. So I just do highlights, and I hope, you know, that you enjoyed that and get a feel for what the game is all about. Right, so stay safe, look after yourself, and hopefully you're wargaming with friends now, but stay safe anyway, and I'll see you again soon.